April 1945. Eastern Germany. The war is dying, but it refuses to die quietly. The makeshift field hospital stands at the edge of a forest, a collection of damaged buildings that once served as a small rural school. Now, its walls are stained with blood and fear. The distant thunder of artillery grows closer each day, a metronome counting down to something inevitable. The Third Reich is collapsing, not with dignity, but with the desperate violence of a wounded animal. Greta Hoffmann moves through the chaos with the practiced calm of someone who has learned to function while everything burns. She is 32 years old, though her eyes carry decades more. A nurse since before the war, she has witnessed the slow transformation of medicine into triage, of healing into merely delaying death. Her hands, once steady with the confidence of saving lives, now tremble slightly when she reaches for the morphine, knowing there is almost none left. Around her, the hospital breathes with suffering. Wounded German soldiers lie on bloodied cots, some crying for their mothers, others silent with the resignation of those who have already accepted their fate. The smell of gangrene and disinfectant mingles with the acrid smoke drifting in from distant fires. Resources that were scarce yesterday are non-existent today. Bandages are washed and reused until they fall apart. Water must be rationed. Hope has become the scarcest commodity of all. Elsa, barely 19, stands frozen in the corner, staring at a soldier who died while she was changing his dressing. This is her first death. It will not be her last. Her hands still grip the soiled bandage, and she cannot seem to let go. Greta approaches, gently takes the bandage from her, and whispers something that sounds like comfort but tastes like ash. Frau Riedel, the oldest among them, moves with rigid efficiency. She is 57, a veteran of the Great War's aftermath, and her loyalty to the regime remains unshaken even as that regime crumbles. She wears her nurse's uniform like armor, her face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the ideology she serves. Where Greta sees patience, Riedel sees soldiers of the fatherland. Where Greta sees tragedy, Riedel sees duty. A German officer enters, his uniform torn, his left arm in a makeshift sling. His face carries the expression of a man who has seen the future and found it unbearable. He approaches the nurses with the weight of terrible knowledge. "They are coming," he says, his voice flat, emptied of emotion. "The Americans, the Russians. It does not matter which finds us first." He pauses, and in that silence lives an entire world of unspoken horrors. They will exterminate us all. That evening, as darkness settles over the forest like a burial shroud, Frau Riedel gathers the nurses. From her pocket, she produces a small cloth pouch. Inside are pills, white and small and final. She places one in each nurse's hand with the solemnity of a communion. "For the worst scenario," she says simply, "you know what they will do to us." Greta stares at the pill in her palm. It is surprisingly light for something that weighs so heavily. Around her, some nurses close their fists around their pills. Others weep quietly. Elsa looks at hers as if it were a spider. Outside, the artillery sounds closer. The war is coming to them, and it is bringing judgment. The question that hangs in the air, unspoken but suffocating, is not whether they will use the pills. The question is when. The forest explodes with sound just before dawn. A plane screams overhead, trailing black smoke like a dying comet. The engines shriek in mechanical agony as the aircraft tears through the canopy, branches snapping like bones. The impact shakes the ground, sending birds fleeing into the grey morning sky. Then, silence. The kind of silence that follows violence. Heavy and waiting. Greta stands at the hospital window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Smoke rises from the crash site, perhaps half a kilometre into the woods. The other nurses gather behind her, and someone whispers what they are all thinking. American. The German officer appears within minutes, barking orders. A patrol must investigate. There might be survivors. Survivors mean prisoners. Prisoners mean intelligence. In the logic of dying empires, even a crashed pilot has value. 2 hours later, they return, dragging a man between them. His flight suit is torn and bloodied, his face pale with shock and pain. His leg bends at an angle that makes Elsa turn away. The soldiers throw him roughly onto an empty cot, and he groans through clenched teeth. James McAllister, 24 years old, born in Montana. He joined the Army Air Forces to escape poverty and see the world. Now he sees the ceiling of a German field hospital and understands he may never see anything else. The German officer stands over him, face twisted with something between hatred and satisfaction. "Let him bleed," he says coldly. "Let him know what we have felt." Greta feels something crack inside her chest. She has watched this war strip away civilization layer by layer until only cruelty remains. She has accepted many things. She cannot accept this. "No," she says quietly. The officer turns to her, stunned by the insubordination. "Matter, what did you say?" "No." Louder now. "He is wounded. We are nurses. We treat the wounded. He is the enemy. He is a patient." The words hang between them like drawn weapons. Frau Riedel steps forward, her face rigid with disapproval. "Greta, you forget yourself. You forget your duty to Germany." But Greta is already moving toward the American, her hands reaching for scissors to cut away his flight suit. Her voice, when she speaks, carries the weight of something breaking and something else being born. "My duty is to heal. It has always been to heal. This is not about Germany anymore, Frau Riedel. This is not even about the war. This is about what we become when everything else is gone." She works in tense silence, cleaning wounds, setting the broken leg with what little supplies remain. The American drifts in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out in English words she does not understand. Once, his eyes open fully and find hers. In that moment, there is no enemy and ally, only fear recognizing fear. Frau Riedel watches from across the room, her expression unreadable. Later, she approaches Greta in the shadows between the cots. "I should report you," she whispers. "I should tell them what you have done." Greta does not look up from her work. Then do it. They will execute you. We are all going to die anyway, Frau Riedel. The only choice left is who we are when it happens. Outside, the artillery grows louder. Time is running out, and in his cot, the wounded American opens his eyes again, watching the German nurse who chose mercy in a world that had forgotten the word. The sound arrives before the soldiers do. Engines, dozens of them. The grinding rumble of tanks and trucks moving through the forest roads like mechanical predators. The German officer hears it first, his face draining of color. He turns to his remaining men, fewer than 10 now, all wounded, all exhausted. They are here. Panic spreads through the hospital like wildfire. The German soldiers who can still move grab their weapons with trembling hands. Some try to hide. Others simply sit, staring at nothing, waiting for the end they have been promised. The nurses huddle together, and Greta sees Elsa's hand move toward her pocket, toward the pill that Frau Riedel gave them. "No," Greta says sharply, grabbing Elsa's wrist. "Not yet, not like this." But what other way is there? The stories they have been told about the Americans, about what they do to German women, to nurses who served the Reich. The propaganda has painted a picture of demons in olive uniforms, coming to exact revenge for every bomb that fell on London, every village burned in France. Greta's mind races. She thinks of the American in the back room, McAllister, barely conscious but alive. She thinks of the wounded German soldiers who cannot run. She thinks of how thin the line has become between survival and surrender. She makes a decision that might save them or damn them. Moving quickly, she tears a white sheet from one of the empty cots. The fabric rips easily, already weakened by too many washings. She ties it to a broken broom handle, her fingers working with desperate speed. "What are you doing?" Frau Riedel's voice cuts through the chaos. "You cannot." "Watch me." Greta walks to the front entrance, to the broken door that no longer closes properly. The white sheet hangs limp in her hands, a symbol that means everything and nothing. Surrender, mercy, defeat, hope, all of it contained in dirty white cotton. She steps outside. The American convoy has stopped at the tree line, perhaps 50 meters away. Soldiers pour from the vehicles, weapons raised, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who have fought across Europe. Their helmets catch the weak sunlight. Their faces are hard, alert, ready for ambush. Greta raises the makeshift white flag above her head. Her arms shake, but not from the weight. The American soldiers see her. Weapons swing in her direction. Someone shouts an order she does not understand. Time stretches impossibly long. She becomes aware of every heartbeat, every breath, the morning cold against her face, the weight of every decision that has led to this moment. Behind her, the other nurses emerge slowly. Frau Riedel, rigid with disapproval but present. Elsa, tears streaming down her face, trembling so hard she can barely stand. An American officer steps forward, his hand raised to halt his men. Captain Daniel Morris, 31, from Philadelphia. He has led his unit through France, Belgium, and now into the heart of a dying Germany. He has seen things that will live in his nightmares forever. He has not seen this. The two groups face each other across the muddy ground. Germans and Americans, nurses and soldiers, victors and vanquished. The silence is absolute, broken only by the distant rumble of more vehicles approaching. No one shoots, no one moves. The moment stretches, fragile as glass. And then Elsa's voice, barely a whisper, but somehow carrying across the space between them, speaking in broken English learned from a schoolbook years ago. "Please kill us quickly." Captain Morris lowers his rifle. The gesture is small, almost imperceptible, but it changes everything. His men watch him, confused, fingers still tight on triggers. They have been trained for combat, for resistance, for the fury of a cornered enemy. They have not been trained for this. Exhausted women in blood-stained uniforms, holding a white flag made from bedsheets. Morris takes 3 steps forward. His boots sink into the mud. Behind him, a young sergeant named Cooper whispers urgently, "Sir, it could be a trap." "Does that look like a trap to you, Cooper?" The captain stops 5 meters from Greta, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into her face, the fear she is trying desperately to hide, close enough to see that she is not much older than his sister back in Philadelphia. "You speak English?" he asks. Greta shakes her head. "Little, very little." Morris gestures toward the building behind her. "Soldiers, inside." She understands enough. "Wounded, all wounded, and—" She searches for the words. Finds them. "Hospital, we are hospital." A voice from Morris's unit, louder now. "They're Nazis, sir." Every damn one of them. Morris does not turn around. His eyes remain locked on Greta's. He has seen enough of this war to know that the word Nazi means different things to different people. It means the SS officer who ordered a village burned. It also means the terrified conscript who never fired his weapon. It means the true believers and the trapped and the complicit and the desperate. It means too much and too little all at once. "Show me," he says. Greta leads him inside, and what Morris sees stops him in the doorway. Wounded German soldiers lying in their own filth, most of them barely conscious. Medical supplies that consist of rags and empty bottles. Blood on the floors, on the walls, in the air itself. And in the back corner, barely visible in the shadows, an American flight suit. Morris crosses the room in 4 strides. McAllister looks up at him with fevered eyes, struggling to focus. "Lieutenant?" Morris kneels beside the cot. "Jesus Christ, McAllister, we thought you were dead." "Germans," McAllister's voice is weak. She... He gestures weakly toward Greta. "She helped me." The information rearranges something in Morris's understanding. He looks back at Greta, then at the wounded Germans, then at the nurses who watch him with the hollow eyes of people who have already begun grieving their own deaths. He makes his decision. "Herr Cooper," he calls out, "get the medic, and bring water, food, whatever we have." "Sir?" "You heard me." Within 20 minutes, American soldiers are moving through the hospital with canteens and ration packs. One young private approaches Elsa, who flinches backward, her hand again moving toward her pocket. The soldier sees the gesture, understands it somehow. Slowly, carefully, he extends the canteen. "Water," he says simply. "Just water." Elsa stares at the offered canteen as if it were a miracle. Her hand emerges from her pocket empty. She takes the water with shaking fingers and drinks, and the cold liquid running down her throat tastes like life. Across the room, Greta and Morris stand beside McAllister's cot, not quite looking at each other, not quite enemies, not quite allies. Outside, the war continues. Inside, something else begins. Something fragile. Something impossible. Something that might be called hope. The first hours pass in careful silence. American soldiers and German nurses work side by side, separated by language and history and an ocean of blood. They do not speak because they do not know what words could possibly bridge the distance between them. So they work. Hands do what mouths cannot. An American medic named Rodriguez shows Greta how to use sulfur powder on infected wounds. She watches his technique, notes the precision, the economy of movement. He is younger than her, perhaps 23, but his hands carry the knowledge of 100 battlefields. When he finishes, he leaves the packet beside her, a gift without ceremony. Greta nods, he nods back. It is enough. Frau Riedel maintains her distance, standing rigid near the far wall like a statue of disapproval given flesh. She watches everything with eyes that judge and calculate. But even she cannot ignore what is happening. The Americans are not the monsters from the propaganda. They are tired young men who smell of cigarette smoke and coffee, who handle the wounded with surprising gentleness. One soldier, barely 18, helps her move a German officer who has soiled himself. The work is degrading, intimate, the kind that strips away pretense. When they finish, the young American meets her eyes and says something she does not understand. But his tone is kind, inexplicably, impossibly kind. Frau Riedel turns away quickly, but not before Greta sees something crack in that stone face. In the afternoon, McAllister opens his eyes fully for the first time. The fever has broken, and clarity returns like sunlight through clouds. He sees American uniforms moving through the room and understands that rescue has come. Then he sees the German soldiers in adjacent cots, sees Greta changing bandages on a young Wehrmacht private, and the situation crystallizes. Hoffmann, he calls out weakly, using the name he heard the other nurses say. Greta approaches. Their eyes meet with the familiarity of patient and caretaker, a bond that exists outside politics. "Thank you," McAllister says in English. Then, struggling with half-remembered high school German, "Danke." Before Greta can respond, recognition flashes across the room. One of the American soldiers, a corporal named Hayes, stops mid-step, staring at McAllister. "Mac? Holy hell, Mac!" Hayes rushes over, grabs McAllister's hand. "We saw you go down. Thought you bought it for sure." They talk rapidly in English, voices overlapping with relief and disbelief. Greta steps back, giving them space. She watches their reunion and feels something twist in her chest. How many German soldiers died alone, with no one to remember their names? How many lie in unmarked graves while these two celebrate survival? But there is no anger in the thought, only exhaustion, only the weight of too much death. Evening comes. Someone produces a battery-powered radio and after cycling through static and propaganda, finds music. American jazz, incongruous and vital, fills the makeshift hospital. The sound is so alien, so alive, that for a moment everyone stops working to listen. Elsa, carrying a tray of used bandages, pauses near the door. The music moves through her like electricity. Her foot taps once, twice. Then, almost unconsciously, she sways, just slightly, just enough. An American soldier sees her and smiles, not with mockery or lust, but with simple human recognition. He is 19 and misses dancing with girls back home. Elsa smiles back. It is the first time she has smiled in 6 months. The gesture is small. But in this place, in this moment, it is everything. Night falls over the forest, like a curtain closing on the world's longest tragedy. Inside the hospital, oil lamps cast long shadows across walls that have witnessed too much suffering. The boundary between German and American has begun to blur, not erased but softened, like pencil lines smudged by careless fingers. Captain Morris works beside Greta, trying to stabilize a German civilian brought in by his patrol. The man is perhaps 60, caught in crossfire, his abdomen torn by shrapnel. They work in focused silence, Morris holding the lamp steady while Greta's hands probe the wound with careful precision. "Doctor," Morris asks, gesturing to her skill. "Nurse, 15 years?" She does not look up from her work. You? Officer, 3 years. Feels like 30. The civilian groans, consciousness flickering. Greta's hands move faster, but Morris can see the hopelessness in her expression. Too much damage, too little equipment. Some wounds cannot be closed. Family? Morris asks quietly. Greta understands. She finds a photograph in the man's pocket. A woman, 2 children, smiling in summer sunlight that belongs to a different universe. Morris stares at the photograph for a long moment. I have a daughter, he says, not knowing if Greta understands. Sarah, she's 4, she likes... He searches for simple words. She likes flowers, yellow flowers. Greta looks up at him then, really looks at him, and sees past the uniform to the father underneath. My brother, she says slowly. He likes music, piano. He is... She gestures, unable to find the English word for prisoner of war. Gone, Morris finishes gently. Yes, gone. They return to their work, but something has shifted. They are no longer enemy nurse and enemy soldier. They are 2 people trying to save a third, united by the simple arithmetic of compassion. The civilian dies an hour later, peaceful at least. His pain finally ended. Greta closes his eyes and whispers something that might be prayer. Morris stands beside her, and together they observe a moment of silence for a man whose name they never learned. Across the room, Frau Riedel performs her own small revolution. An American sergeant sits shivering on a broken chair, exhausted from hours of work. She approaches him with a wool blanket salvaged from somewhere, her movements stiff and formal. She drapes it over his shoulders without meeting his eyes. Cold, she says, in heavily accented English. Just that one word. The sergeant looks up at her, surprised. Thank you, ma'am. Riedel nods once sharply and walks away. But Greta sees her hands trembling, sees the way she steadies herself against the wall when she thinks no one is watching. The fortress is crumbling, brick by brick. Near the radio, Elsa has gathered courage. She hums along with the music, and the young American soldier from earlier asks her something in English. She does not understand the words, but understands the invitation. They dance, awkwardly, carefully, in the small space between the cots. It lasts perhaps 30 seconds before self-consciousness returns and they separate, embarrassed but smiling. Greta finds herself at the back of the room, looking at the 2 cots side by side. On the left, McAllister, the American pilot. On the right, a German officer with a chest wound. Both sleeping, both breathing. Both alive because someone chose mercy over hatred. Captain Morris appears beside her, following her gaze. No more killing, Greta says quietly. Testing the words, Morris understands perfectly. No more killing, he agrees. Outside, the war rages on. Inside, it has ended. 3 days later, the hospital has transformed. Not physically. The walls remain cracked, stained with violence and time. The supplies are still scarce, rationed carefully between too many wounded. The building itself continues to decay, held together by improvisation and desperate hope. But something fundamental has changed in the air, in the spaces between people, in the quiet rhythm of survival. A routine has emerged. American soldiers arrive each morning with supplies scavenged from their convoy. German nurses distribute them according to need, not nationality. The wounded are treated in order of severity, whether they wear grey or olive. Meals are shared. Stories are exchanged in broken fragments of language, supplemented by gestures and the universal grammar of exhaustion. The fear has dissolved, not completely, perhaps never completely, but enough that people sleep without clutching pills in their pockets. Enough that Elsa laughs when a young American private attempts German and accidentally calls a bandage a potato. Captain Morris has commandeered a small office where he and Greta meet each morning to assess supplies and prioritize treatments. They have developed their own hybrid language, part English, part German, part medical terminology that transcends borders. Sometimes they simply point and nod, understanding flowing beneath words. This morning, they treat a German child, perhaps 8 years old, brought in by refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. His leg is badly burned, infected, threatening gangrene. Greta holds his hand while Morris cleans the wound, and the boy screams and cries for his mother who may no longer exist. When it is finished, when the child finally sleeps from exhaustion, Greta and Morris sit side by side on the floor, too tired to stand. "How many more?" Greta asks quietly. Morris shakes his head. "Too many. Always too many." Near the window, Frau Riedel watches Elsa teach an American medic how to properly fold bandages for maximum reuse. The old woman's face has softened, the rigid ideology that armored her for so long, slowly cracking under the weight of simple human decency. She will never speak of her transformation, will never admit that something inside her has fundamentally changed. But when a wounded German soldier asks for water, and an American private brings it without hesitation, she no longer looks away in disapproval. The white flag still hangs in the window, faded and dirty but present. It no longer means surrender. It means something harder to define. Sanctuary, perhaps, or simply refusal. Refusal to let hatred have the final word. In the afternoon, Greta finds a moment alone. She sits at the broken doorway, watching spring struggle to return to the forest despite the war. In her lap rests a small notebook salvaged from the ruins, its pages water-stained but usable. She writes slowly, carefully, in German first, then attempts English beneath. "Here we did not win. Here we survived. Together." She pauses, pen hovering over paper, then adds one final line. "Perhaps that is its own kind of victory. The war will end soon. History will be written by others, in distant capitals by people who were not here. They will speak of triumph and defeat, of justice and retribution, of nations rising and falling. But in this small hospital at the edge of a dying forest, a different story has been written. Not in the grand language of empires, but in the quiet vocabulary of water offered, wounds dressed, hands held in darkness. A story of people who chose, in the ruins of everything, to remain human.